Good morning, everyone, and welcome. I'm just setting up my screen a little bit more clearly so I can see everyone. Welcome, and I'm so excited to see you all here. My name is Dr. Christine Brooks, and I'm core faculty at California Institute of Integral Studies, and have been supporting Akasha Jensmith in her work in the East-West Psychology Department in completing her doctoral dissertation. And so we are here to receive some teaching about this dissertation topic. We'll be having a brief discussion, both me as the chair and Ted Esser as one of the committee members will be engaging in some dialogue around the dissertation, and then we'll be opening it up to the whole group. Just for some context, there is a third committee member, Chandra Alexandra, who is not able to be with us live today for the event, but will be meeting with all of us on the committee on Thursday, where we will be convening with Akasha Jen to just finalize the process of the dissertation there in that container. But today we're really here to celebrate, to learn, and to gather together in honor of this amazing work. So I'm going to turn it over to our amazing presenter. Please feel free to introduce yourself a little bit and to launch right in however it's good for you. And then I'll come back and facilitate with you once the presentation is complete. Folks, we are recording this. Please feel free to keep your camera on or turn your camera off, however you listen best during presentation mode. And we will see you all when we reconvene for discussion in just a few moments.
Hello, everyone. I'm Akasha Jensmith, and I want to thank you for being here. And I'd love to just start with taking a moment to thank all of my teachers up to this point that have helped me get to right here, right now, because it wouldn't have been possible without all of you, and I'm deeply grateful. I'm also really grateful to all of the support from everyone at CIS and all of the scholars who have come before me. So my presentation today is on my dissertation, and the name is Searching for Passion, a Deeper Understanding of the Passionate Engaged Experience. And if you see the 67 down here, 67 slides, don't worry about that. Most of those are references. Okay, so this is the overview of the presentation today. We're going to do the introduction, the problem, the literature review, the theoretical framework, research question, methodology, implementation, results, analysis, conclusion, and recommendations. So to start, I thought it would be helpful to give you all a felt sense of passionate engagement. So I want to invite you to just close your eyes and just feel the body as well as you can right now in this moment. Feel the body and tune into one of the senses. Hearing is often an easier one for people to really drop into the present moment through. So just notice everything you're hearing. And then imagine yourself in connection. You can be in connection with nature, or perhaps something in art. Just imagine yourself in connection with whatever comes to mind, another person, and feel the most alive sensation you could possibly imagine. Incredibly, incredibly alive, with love and bliss and awe moving through you, profound gratitude, a deep sense of being home in yourself, in your body, and a knowing that this level of being, expression, presence, engagement is truly what you're here for. It's how you're meant to be living. And if you closed your eyes, you can go ahead and open them. So I just wanted to give you a brief glimpse of what we're talking about today. So passionate engagement can happen with any object. So an individual can have this experience with, as I mentioned, nature, an art form like dance or music, another person. One participant was having it in inquiry, so just in a deep state of meditation and questioning. So it's possible with anything. So that's the first part to know. The second part to know about the research and this work was the goal was to just better understand it and to be able to describe it. And to the best of my knowledge, this is the first time this is being researched. So we're all pretty aware of how many people are suffering. I would like to think we're all pretty aware of how many people are suffering in the United States. So many people. 40 million adults in the US are struggling with anxiety. And in 2021, 20 million adults in the US had a major depressive episode. And in the last 10 years, these numbers have just been increasing each year. So how might this be different? The following research could be an answer to that question. So this process was a lot like following the breadcrumbs, and my intuition definitely informed it all the way through. And so the literature review just gives us an umbrella, of course, of where we're going. So positive psychology, flow, which again, most people are familiar with, a state of concentration so focused that it amounts to absolute absorption in an activity. And then vital engagement came out of the flow research, and it's essentially flow with meaning. And the way it's defined here is a strong felt connection or a completeness of involvement. The next part of the literature review was with passion, and harmonious passion specifically is a positive feeling associated with a specific activity. And it's important to mention that the research demonstrates that the meaning we make has great impact on our well-being. And all of these things, flow, vital engagement, harmonious passion, they also contribute to well-being. So the next part of the literature review was motivation, and specifically intrinsic and extrinsic. Intrinsic motivation is doing something just because of its inherent satisfaction, just for the love of doing it. Extrinsic motivation is doing something for a separate outcome as a result of doing it. Autotelic individuals are people who are internally driven, they're curious, they have a sense of purpose, and are more prone to flow. They need little in the way of possessions, entertainment, comfort, power, because life is rewarding. Life itself is rewarding. So the theoretical framework for the research is transpersonal psychology, and that's because of the spirituality component. Many of the participants were engaged in spiritual practices, and the experience itself has a spirituality component to it. And then postmodernism, because of the multiple truths perspective. Truth is relative. So the research question is, what are the attributes of passionate engagement? The methodology is qualitative to better understand the individual's experiences, and phenomenology, which is defined here as the study of the meaning of experience as it relates to a concept or phenomenon. So the way the study was conducted was 11 participants who had experienced passionate engagement and regularly engaged in a contemplative or creative practice, or both, from the ages of 38 to 57, were interviewed via Zoom mainly, and 10 were via Zoom, and one was done in person. Initially, I wanted to do them all in person, but this was during COVID, and so the first one was in person, and then the rest were done via Zoom. And data was analyzed using thematic content analysis, which resulted in 15 themes. Then from these themes, passionate engagement, a definition of passionate engagement was created. The secondary research question was, could passionate engagement be cultivated, and if so, how? So part of phenomenology is bracketing or epoche. And so these are the points that felt important to mention because of my biases. So more than 20 years practicing, studying, and professionally facilitating contemplative meditations and arts, which are informed mainly by Buddhism and Hinduism. And then travel and training in Eastern Buddhist and Hindu countries. And some of those examples are traditional Balinese and Thai dance, Advaita Vedanta, Indian devotional singing and chanting, yoga teacher training, and silent meditation retreats. And then multiple passionate engagement experiences over a 30-year period of time. Feels a little strange to list all this here like that, but it is important to share. Okay, so the results, our definition. It's a state during which a person is connecting with an object, such as another person, nature, or an activity, and includes these things: heightened sense of awareness, embodiment, mindfulness, vulnerability, confidence, bliss, love, increased sense of vitality, relaxation, ease, surrendering to something larger than self, deep meaning, such as this is how we're meant to be living, peaceful sense of fulfillment, as in feeling home or complete, and temporal distortion. So these are the themes. And the way this is organized, just to help orient you to the slide, is the themes are in bold. The sub-themes are listed under the themes with the hyphens here. And then the quotes in italics are the participants' words, which are describing that specific theme and sub-theme. So there are 15 themes, and there isn't enough time to go into all the sub-themes for the purpose of this presentation. So my intention is to give you a feeling of each one and a deeper understanding. So the first one is connection, and the sub-themes are connected and engaged. And it's a sense of being connected to the whole environment. This participant was describing an experience of walking at a meditation center at night and seeing two owls. The second theme, embodied, the sub-theme in the body, and this is described as embodying what I am. The third theme, heightened sense of awareness. The sub-themes are increased experience of awareness. energetic sense, brighter, more colorful, experiencing silence. And then the ways these were described by participants is all the senses are alive, sensual. I was seeing pure light. The fourth theme, mindfulness. The sub-themes are in the moment, less thinking, contemplative practice, curiosity. And this was described as being fully immersed in the present moment now. And this participant was bathing in a snowmelt stream. The fifth theme, vulnerability. The sub-themes were feeling vulnerable, openness, scared, danger, and edge. I was pleasantly surprised by this theme. You know, with all of the bias that I had coming into this, I didn't make the connection to the vulnerability piece. So this was lovely to discover for me. And the participants described this as incredibly vulnerable, a sense of nakedness. This participant was giving a presentation on awakening to 50 people on Zoom and realized halfway through that it wasn't working, that what he felt that what he had done wasn't right. And so he had this incredible feeling of feeling so vulnerable. And then from out of there, his experience of passionate engagement arose. And this other participant said, I was writing a lot of fear and panic. And he was describing sitting with his father in the hospital when his father was dying. And his father asked him if he should let go. And then in that moment, all of that arose for the participant. And the danger edge piece, some participants even thought that it might be a contributing factor. And I had almost missed this completely, the danger edge piece, because that wasn't something I had experienced. And so I think there are degrees of this with the vulnerability. The sixth theme, confident. The sub-theme, confidence, empowered. And this participant described this as no part of me was trying to get away from myself. And she was describing performing classical Indian dance at a performance of music and dance that she had produced. Number 7, ease. And the sub-theme is effortless ease, feeling deeply at ease, no muscle tension. That was during a yoga class for that participant. The 8th theme, relaxed. The sub-theme, relaxation. The body feels totally settled, nervous system relaxation. Okay, the 9th theme, sense of vitality. The sub-themes are enlivened, passion, increased vitality, excitement. And this participant described this experience while she was volunteering in Haiti. Raw, bare experience of being alive, pure life force. The 10th theme, bliss. The sub-themes were joy, awe, ecstatic. And this participant described that as a lot of joy. Oh, so much ecstasy burning through every aspect of my being. The 11th theme, love, with the sub-themes gratitude, heart, experiencing love. And this participant described this. She was at a tantric meditation retreat. A flood of love and bliss and heart opening and connection to spirit. The 12th theme, peaceful sense of fulfillment. The subthemes are nourishment, fulfillment, and at peace. And this was described by participants as at home inside myself, profound sense of fulfillment. The 13th theme, surrendering to something larger than self. The subthemes are surrender, allowing, letting go, feeling free, part of a larger whole, sacred, nature, creative expression, and intuition. Participants describe this as I can feel how my personality dissolves and this higher force comes through me. This participant was dancing, and it was improv, and there were live musicians, and she was describing how the force comes through her and it's like she has just danced to the music without knowing what it is. The next example, an energy that's greater than us and reminds us of our true nature. And the last example, whole place just got purified or sacralized. And that was after his father died in the hospital. The 14th theme, distorted temporal sense. So participants experience timelessness, time speeding up, and time slowing down, and a continuum. And so this was described as a sense of infinity. The last theme, deep meaning, purpose of life. The sub-themes are special experience, purpose, this is right how life is meant to be, sustained passionate engagement, and feeling of being home. So to explain sustained passionate engagement a bit more, some participants felt like it just kept going for them. One participant even stated that she felt her whole life was that way. Most of her life was living in passionate engagement. And others talked about it going on for periods of time. So that's what that means, a sustained passionate engagement. The way this was described by participants, this theme and sub-themes, living passionate engagement, that's what enlightenment is. And to give a little context, this participant was talking about her own experience in addition to how she saw some of the great teachers like Buddha and Christ. She felt their lives were that. The next example, this is why we are here. Something I'm made to be, this is it, what life is. And home in my heart. So the participants so brilliantly articulated the experience. And so I wanted to give you a little bit deeper of a dive into, the way they describe this by sharing their exact words. So these next couple of slides are just going to give you a bit of that. I was doing an inquiry exercise into the absolute, and suddenly I dropped into this deep, deep sense of empty nothingness that was very holding paradoxically. It was like nothingness, but it was the most holding experience that you could possibly imagine, like being held by nothingness. And my nervous system relaxed. I don't think I've ever experienced such a level of nervous system relaxation like that one. Just completely, utterly settled in myself like nothing else. And I could clearly see my mind and egoic patterns and defenses trying to reconstitute themselves in relationship to this. I felt so much love for those patterns. I felt so much deep love for seeing the little young child trying to survive, efforting, And it was so obvious that it was just such an innocent energy, just trying to survive, terrified of this nothing amazing space that was. But the sense of me was much more in the nothingness than in the little child trying to reconstitute itself. So it was easy to just feel this deep compassion for the patterns, the sense of I am nothing, I am space. It was just the full human experience being beautifully experienced. So the secondary research question was, can passionate engagement be cultivated? And if so, how? So these were the responses. All of the participants said yes, they felt that it could. 7 stated through contemplative practices. 4 participants said being interviewed and asked detailed questions about their passionate engagement experience was a way to cultivate it. And I can also add that doing this research definitely for me was a way to cultivate it throughout much of the process. I felt passionately engaged. Another participant shared, draw it out of another by encouraging it or being present in connection. And one who was experiencing passionate engagement could share it like a transmission. And I feel like I experienced this through the interviews and even just reading the words and writing the words. And then the last example, you can create the conditions for it, and then whether or not it will be experienced is unknown. So this is a summary of what their responses were to the question. And this quote is from a participant that also is another way of explaining how you can cultivate it. Passionate engagement is more likely to arise by being open-minded, being aware of experience, and when preferences or fear arise, being willing to move past it. Engage all senses in everything you're doing, and that connects you with experiences more deeply. And so, again, this last quote that I'm going to share with you sums up the can it be cultivated piece and the how. It's important to have a spiritual path, to have an embodiment path. The body yearns to have these kinds of experiences, and it can happen. I think a lot of people have these experiences through lovemaking, dance, music, song, through expression, any type of art, really. So I think it's important to connect to creativity, whatever. There's a plethora of options, and finding what moves somebody. Could be knitting, but something that gives that sense of engagement with life in a beautiful and intimate way. Getting in our bodies is crucial for that, because our bodies are a direct connection with this realm, with life force, with that which animates our ability to have these experiences. And speaking through the tantric lens, for us to come into more and more a wider capacity for divine experience. It's a practice, and that's what the spiritual traditions do. That's what sacred dance does. These are training wheels so that we can have more sustainable experiences of being in that level of totality that allows for the passionate engagement with life. It can be really simple. Meditation even is an avenue to that. Cooking could be your avenue. It's really just about the presence and that it evokes something in you. There's a spark. You feel that enlivening sensation. You have to have that initial spark, and then that's going to be a thing that can reconnect. And I think it's also important to have a practice, to do it consistently, to build that capacity, and to reconnect with that experience of passionate engagement regularly. Okay, so I use thematic content analysis. The first step was really just being with the interviews, checking them for accuracy, taking handwritten notes into a journal as I watched and listened to the interviews. The second part, I used structural, in vivo, and magnitude coding, which led to 42 subthemes, and they were grouped into 15 themes. The third part was the definition that was created from the themes. And this may sound simple and clear cut, but there were pages and pages, 50 pages of handwritten notes. I actually have some here. I don't know if you can see in the camera, but this is an example of what it looked like. And so in conclusion, if people are having meaningful, engaged interactions that leave them feeling positive and enlivened and like they're living the way that they're meant to be living, then couldn't this experience help those struggling with depression and anxiety? If follow-up studies demonstrate that passionate engagement can increase well-being and be cultivated, then therapists could teach this as an intervention to those struggling with depression and anxiety. And so recommendations for future research, we could ask the question, can passionate engagement increase well-being? Also, can it be cultivated? Research can be done with specific groups like lovers. Some participants talked about having this experience just in conversation with their lover. Nature, several talked about nature. Individuals with specific contemplative practices, to be able to hone which practices could be good to use. A passionate engagement scale, and sustained passionate engagement could be researched. Thank you very much.
And thank you so much, Akasha Jen, for that teaching. It's so wonderful to see all of this come to fruition and to learn from you in this way. Um, we are going to shift now into some discussion. And how this usually works is that your committee members will start with this process. And Ted Esser and I will be offering a little bit of our own thinking, questions, things that are coming up for us in relationship to your work. And then after we've concluded our portion, we'll open it up in case anyone who's joined and is here and present has any questions, comments, anything they'd like to know more about from you as well. So I'll turn it over to Ted first, and then I'll come in with some ideas afterwards.
Thank you very much for the presentation. Even though having read it, your the presentation brought even further sort of clarity and things for me to ask you and talk to you about. So it really, as you go forward and present this work elsewhere, you've done a great job with this presentation. So that's the first piece of feedback. And that, as I wrote to you earlier, each, chapter was really solid. There wasn't any sort of major issue, and really, it only leads to one question that I have. But before going there, I wanted to reiterate about your own story, your own way into this. And for me, that was a powerful part of your dissertation when you were describing those components in the subheading called Before Dissertation Interviews and Writing. Those journal excerpts were really powerful. So that didn't make the presentation, but that was a really impactful part of it. And perhaps in different venues, that might be something that you would choose not to, or to potentially present. It would just depend on the audience. And so I wanted to ask you, and Christine, tell me if this is the time to do it or in a couple of days. Did you have any questions about my comments that I had written to you? Did everything seem clear?
Everything seemed clear. Yes.
Okay, so you don't have any questions for me about my feedback to you. Okay, and so one of the questions that I have that I had in the dissertation, and that in some ways was amplified by the presentation, was that I was a little surprised that there weren't more that you didn't include. So maybe you have at this point, I don't know. And you both, meaning Christine and you, know the material even better than I do, right? You've been living with it so long. I was surprised that the sub theme when you were describing in the quotes about passion itself, I think you had one. And because it's in your title, right? It's like such a major thing. I was, you know, wanting more if there was more there in that part. And so I just wanted to get your feedback about that piece.
Sure. So participants didn't talk a lot about passion, interestingly. There were some comments, but a lot of what they were doing, is my sense, is really describing it. And so that sub-theme that had a lot with, the vitality and the excitement, and those were all aspects of the passion, was how I understood, them to be situated in the research and what they were sharing. So it was
Mm.
like passion was being described in all of those other ways. So so I didn't go into that sub-theme too much in terms of the presentation.
Okay. And then as long as you both feel that somewhere in the dissertation you kind of state that, that would be my thought, that something like that, if it's not explicitly stated,
Okay.
would be a good small add. If you did, like I said, you're both, more familiar with the dissertation, so there might be, something that I missed along those lines. Um, and then let's see. So now I'm taking a look at the comments that I had, directly from your presentation. Um, let's see. Going back, there were a couple of themes where the sub themes were almost identical to the themes, right? So in other words, I noticed this more now than I did as I was reading. And so this is more of like a check-in. If sort of just address that, right? You know what I mean? That this sub theme is actually a sub theme. And so as long as that, part was explicitly stated, then I feel comfortable with that. Otherwise, it's just something that I noticed. And uh, let's see, there was a component within the 15th theme, the purpose of life, and sustained passionate engagement. And I was actually wondering if that was a piece that I missed where, that passion dialogue, might be in there. And so again, it may be the case that another reader, may have the same question about, it's titled passion, you know, and so if there's something more to potentially tease out in that purpose of life, that's obviously a really powerful and ending place, right? Because you're ending with that theme. Again, you may have done that, but I just want to point that out. And then did you feel that a unnamed theme was paradox? There were a couple of places that I noticed within the presentation, right? The whole component of the person describing emptiness, right? And of course, Westerners can be confused by that term, right? So the person is being held. And so that in itself is a paradox, right? That there's something not apparently empty, at least linguistically about that. and then another person with the quote, I am nothing, right? And yet there's the I am. And it wouldn't surprise me if it showed up, like paradox maybe showed up elsewhere. And so I don't know if you have any reaction to that thought.
I definitely noticed that. Also in, the different ways they describe their experiences, there seem to be a lot of opposites or polarities or paradoxes. I definitely noticed that. And to me, that is the nature of some of these, transpersonal experiences or experiences that feel, relative and absolute at the same time. So it makes sense to me that it's there.
And so do you feel that it rises to the level of needing an overt inclusion in
Hmm.
some larger or smaller way? Or, you know what I mean? As you look back, so again, that's a suggestion that I didn't write, but that I noticed.
Okay.
Yeah.
You
So
know,
for
I'm
me, it's not a make or break. Like you and Christine could be in dialogue about that if that's worthwhile to you or not. And I'm sorry, you were going to say something.
Oh, you know, I did notice that, and so I appreciate it. I appreciate what you're sharing. Absolutely. And I'm open to it, of course, including it.
Yeah, and a lot of similar work when we're talking about, I'll just call it ultimate things, paradox often crops up. And so yeah, that's just sort of an additional thought there. And is there anywhere else in the dissertation um, where you talk about the life force component? And then this is a more of a question than an observation that it wasn't there. This differentiation between flow, right, and how it's talked so much about in literature, and you have a lot of it, right, in your lit review. But I'm describing like later in your analysis or your conclusion section is normatively short, but just highlighting this difference, right, between passionate engagement and flow.
Mm. Yes, that's talked about in the
Do you
discussion
feel like
chapter.
they're yes. Okay. And so for what it's worth, it may be useful in, like future presentations where you make that little note, only because flow is so well known and so much of what you're talking about is, a kind of flow where in the way you frame things, the key is passion, like my cat. So yeah, that would be my final piece. Very wonderful research, and also, among the research that's like least need for tweaking. I had very little that I was feeling that I was needing to add. So you really did do a wonderful, thorough job.
Thank you. I really appreciate that,
Yeah,
and I appreciate
yeah,
all your help and support up till now.
yeah. Really inspiring work.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ted, and for that feedback and those observations. Paradox is was when you said it, it gave me this right feeling. So, I mean, I just think paradox is such an interesting thing to experience in and of itself, but I hadn't put that language here. And so thank you for that contribution today. It's really, I don't know, there's something very bubbly about it to me that's very
Yeah.
interesting. So Akasha Jen, we've been deep in this together for a while, so I don't have any specific editorial notes or anything sort of around the document itself or the content. Um, I guess what I'm really curious about are two things. And one, I don't want to put you on the spot, but I'm going to introduce something we've never talked about because it really came up in your last couple of slides where you were talking about next steps. And as someone who's
Mm.
devoted a lot of time and attention to adult personality development in my own work, I noticed this question coming up about varieties of personality or developmental space and place of individuals, particularly adults. And if you have any opinion or any wisdom or any professional experience with noticing how personality plays into the availability or the effort it takes or the access to these phenomenon that you're describing, and or if developmental state you've noticed has anything to do. So what's the deal between these experiences and adult development and adult personality is something that I'm curious about and wonder if you have any opinions or initial thoughts about, and if that's something you might consider exploring more moving forward.
Well, the first thing that comes to mind when you mention that was the autotelic individuals, the ones that have a sense of purpose, and they're not as interested in, the material things and being entertained or even comfortable all the time. And that comfort piece, I think, is an important one in the sense that, a lot of the people who were interviewed, they've had practices for, their whole lives, 20 years more or more. And so I think that from what I've seen, that tends to increase a person's capacity to sit in discomfort or to sit with things that are challenging. So when, one of the participants made the comment about the way to experience passionate engagement is to be willing to move past fear, or when preferences come up, maybe that aren't, something you don't want to be experiencing, then to be able to be willing to still sit with that instead of to try to change or make something different. I think that takes a certain kind of person who's developed a capacity to be able to move through those things, rather than what many of us do, what I do at times, to want to move away from it or avoid or reach for the next thing that feels better in the moment. So I think in terms of, personality, I think there's a certain level of commitment, perseverance, tenacity that can be required for some of these things, and commitment. Yeah.
Thank you. Yes, that's really, really helpful. Do you, in your opinion, and from the data that you have collected, are there spontaneous experiences of this outside of that developmental prioritizing we were just talking about that anyone reported or that you are aware of as well? Or is this a cultivated phenomenon?
Oh, definitely. I would say most of participants who were having these experiences and talking about them, they were coming on spontaneously. I can speak for myself. I've had it literally just eating, just eating food and the experience of the sensation of taste, and a complete profound experience through the connecting with the experiencing of tasting the food or the food itself. So I absolutely think that they can happen spontaneously. And my guess is that's probably how they're happening most of the time. But there appears to me to be a very obvious link to contemplative practices and them being something that can help people experience it more if they want to.
So the cultivation is not to have the experience per se, but the cultivation piece is more about maybe making the experiences more available or more likely. Then, got it.
Yeah, and then also, the meaning piece feels really important as well, like the meaning making that participants were having in relation, to the experience was, it was literally what they were here for, what life was about. Some were saying that they were answering the calls that came about through passionate engagement experience years later, that it completely changed, their orientation to human beings and life, and so I think that's a really important piece too. This is going off a little bit on a tangent compared to what you asked, but I do think that's an important piece with the cultivating of it.
Yeah, no, it feels very interrelated as you say it. I'm seeing those connections and how how the who of the person really does have a lot to do with the experience within and without in these contexts. So thank you, that's really helpful. I guess my questions were coming from sort of the traditional way that we think about transpersonal psychology, which is often, beyond ego is some of the shorthand that gets used. But I often wonder if it's through ego, through personality, through our lived experience, and that transpersonal experiences truly do arise. And I'm making that connection from what you've taught us today. I'm sure other people would have other interpretations of it, but it just feels very aligned that the selfhood is very important to how this is experienced and how this is cultivated within an individual's life.
I mean, that makes a lot of sense to me. And that vulnerability piece was such a special part of it. And to have all of that be there, the insecurities, the vulnerabilities, the participant talked about the little child in him, while those profound experiences of something greater than self were happening at the same time. To me, the integration and the paradox, we could use that word again, of those things which you wouldn't necessarily think would be coexisting, were all existing together. And that was one of the most exciting parts of this for me. And even in my own experiences, when I was having these moments of seeing the vulnerability and the insecurities, along with the incredible, profound, it's difficult to talk about the profound beingness of all that is happening within me. It just felt like such a special thing to have it all be there and not feel like that part can't be here because we're over here experiencing this part. It just felt like an integrated way of being and living all that we are.
Thank you so much. Yeah. And then for my last piece, I know that you've been teaching in these ideas, these realms for a long time. I know that you have a deep practice and that you support others in their work toward experiencing things like this engagement. But I am curious, now that you're coming to a completion with your doctoral studies, how will you teach this out in the world? What is next? And maybe you could share with us how you see the application of this work, not just the ideas of this work.
Well, I would love to turn it into a book. I would love to write a book. And, the participants, I mean, it was such an incredible process to interview them and learn from them and be with them. I'm so grateful to what they brought. And I would love for more people to be able to experience that, what they shared. So I love the idea of a book. I also have already been weaving it into my work since I started researching it and sharing about it. But I'm not sure beyond that at this point.
Well, the book sounds great, and relish in the moment, and I hope that it continues to flower for you and that, you really are able to get the teaching out into the community in novel ways, which I know you're always very inventive with how you share your teachings with others.
Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. Just to check in, Ted, any other comments before we open it up in the wider container?
Just that I do see years of branching work from this work. I can imagine not just from what you've shown, but that I can imagine that you'll be referring back, if not in your writing, within your own mind, to this particular piece, and that it has the kind of fuel that relates for many years of more related projects. So
Thank you.
yeah.
So we're going to pivot now, and I invite the group, anyone from the group who might have a comment or question or want to engage, from what you've learned today with Akasha Jen. So please feel free to just take yourself off mute, jump in. We're a small group, so it doesn't really need to be all that moderated. Or feel free to raise your hand or put something in the chat if that's more your style.
Akasha, Jen, thank you so much for this. I have been anxiously, excitedly awaiting your presentation since it was announced on email, primarily to learn from you because I am interested in, I'm a PhD student in the ecology, spirituality, and religion program and hope to write on an autocosmology with phenomenology of my own experiences, and I'm so curious how you navigated this particular work. I'm curious, knowing that there may not be a specific reason for going one way or the other, or it may just be the scholarly process. But what made you, I'm so curious, what made you decide um, to specifically do narrative style phenomenological interviews?
Thank you. And I wish you the best in your work and with your research and process as well. I want to say that to start. It just seemed to me to make the most sense to really get the essence of the experience as people were living it, to just sit with them and learn from them. And, because this topic, passionate engagement, hasn't been done before, it really was a lot of just what can I do to get to the essence of this experience? And what made the most sense to me was just to have each person share about their experience of it and do it, phenomenology in that sense. And yeah, that's mainly it. Is there anything else I can share or?
Maybe for another one-on-one conversation if you're open to it. I'm just
Sure.
curious, yeah, just what elements of phenomenology, how much did that play a role? How much does it need to play a role? But those are my own curiosities. I don't know that they need to be with the group. Yeah, I'm bubbling up so many ideas for future research, particularly as engaged with nature. I am curious. Tell me more about the choice of word around the word object as the engagement other um, versus subject or other.
That word just seemed to make the most sense to cover literally everything, essentially everything. Just seemed to be a general enough term and one that's also used in phenomenology as a way to just cover it all.
Was there any subject object work from the perspective of, for instance, developmental psychologists, or is that not the meaning of what you were intending?
No, there wasn't any of that. There wasn't any of that in this dissertation.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you. Thank you for being here and thank you for your questions.
It
Looks like
it's, yeah, a question in the chat. It's a comment, actually. Is it okay with you if I just read it aloud so it's on the recording as well?
that'd be great. Thanks.
Okay, the comment says, as a therapist in training, completing my master's degree in ICPW this fall, congratulations. The implications of your research and what it has sparked in me for my work with my clients and in relation to my own embodied practices is truly inspiring. Thank you for your presentation.
Thank you. Thank you for that comment. That means a lot.
Any other comments, questions? Please feel free to put them in the chat as Ruth just did, or just chime right in.
I was gonna just chime right in because I was really, and it's maybe more of a comment. maybe a question will develop as I speak, but I'm in the East-West psychology PhD. And I was really struck. I think you also said that this was one of the most surprising parts of your research was realizing and my ears perked up when you were speaking about it, that some of the experiences that allowed an entry into the passionate space were tied to fear or danger, and that vulnerability of just like confronting that. And I was also surprised to hear that today. I don't know why. I was like, wait, what? And being a student of Jung in the program and thinking about shadow work, a lot of the things that I've been working with in my own experience and with others is around this idea of like that aspect of ourselves and our consciousness being a necessary part of integration in order to open to joy. And like you have to, that the paradox that I think Ted was speaking of, like you have to be able to allow those uncomfortable confronting moments in order to then have like the big passion and the big joy. So I was really like sitting up when I heard you say that. I was like, what? Wait a minute, because I was not expecting that. And so I don't know, I wanted to kind of comment and thank you, because that really, again, it sparked something in me as well. And just curious to hear like if there's anything there for you to maybe develop more, or any particular case that was really striking to you. I think you used one of the examples, but yeah, just if you have anything more to say about that.
What comes to mind when you mention that piece that was speaking to you was to describe a little bit more in detail one of the other participants' experience. And she had woken up early. She was in Thailand, and she had woken up early to swim way out away from shore. And she was alone, and swam way out. And so for her, the fear came about like, could there be a shark? Could I be in danger? But she was also having such blissful, you know, sensations and experiences. And her her comment around the danger edge piece was, could it be because of the hypervigilance that can come about through some of those experiences, be one of the things that adds to the increased sense of vitality and the aliveness and the senses being heightened, and all of those, which were aspects of the experience. But there's also, to me, that piece that a lot of participants talked about of, riding the wave of the fear and the panic. One of the participants talked about, and being able to stay with it enough until, which I see this as the surrender and the allowing and the letting go piece. Like when a lot of that was coming in and they were talking about that, I don't think it's an easy thing for many people to do, especially those heightened states like panic and terror and different things. So I have a lot of respect for the work, the shadow work, the being with the harder stuff. And I know myself, I have experienced some really beautiful openings. And to me, passionate engagement is an experience that happens to degrees. So there could be lesser versus full on, really like profound levels of it. And I feel like I have experienced myself some of those passionate engagement experiences through grief. Yeah, and being with grief.
Thank you.
Any other offerings or questions, reflections back?
Well, I don't know if this is helpful, or it comes from my bias of what interests me is the link between passion, engagement, and life force. May be a really interesting avenue for you to explore. That relationship to flow. But, I think about passion and creation, the links there. And your, work in Buddhism and Hinduism and prana, if you're going to go into a more sort of esoteric exploration of that sort of thing, you set up a really beautiful set of links, at least as I see it.
Yes. Yes. And I have all these moments flashing through of participants sharing about the life force and their experiences of it, and, the deeper practices. And one statement that comes to mind is one participant was saying, I feel creational. I feel like I can create in relationship with the world, that level of, a lot of times the way that it felt like it was being described was a sense of empowerment and ability to create, and then all of the energy with that to do that. That's what comes to mind when you mention it. And also the other piece, circling back to your passion comment, to me, that aliveness that people were describing, the excitement, the intensity, that was the passion piece. The stronger sense of life force, that was for them how they were experiencing the passion. That's how I understood a lot of it.
Yeah, I don't see it as necessary for this work, but in my research, I described like a meta theme, and I was almost wondering, essentially, passion, right? Again, given the link to your title and some of the through line, being a kind of meta theme that could be further teased out. There's your book, for instance, or other venues, other spin-off things that can come from this articles.
Thank you. Yes, there were so many directions I wanted to go in. I wanted to go deeper into Tantra. I wanted to go deeper into the esoteric practices. I wondered about mystical experiences, unitive, all of the things. There were so many directions that felt like I could go. And what's interesting is the Tantra piece didn't present itself explicitly until one of the last couple interviews. And so the way that this research came about was it intuitively dropped in that my topic was Tantra, but I wasn't able to make the connection in the research or the literature until the very end when that was happening. So it's just interesting, the way it all unfolded in the process.
Yeah, and I can see what you're saying with the final product. I know with my dissertation research, I had a folder that was like future future articles or future things, because so much, as you were saying, comes out of the process that you just it just doesn't have a place right now. Yeah.
And that's the ever and never-ending challenge with qualitative research too, is that our data sets are so big and people don't narrate their lives directly at our topic. So all of this amazing, extra, incredible information is there. And then our methodological demands are such that sometimes we don't get to include it in the dissertation piece. I know that you're holding a lot of rich data, and yet the task at hand was a narrowing effect as opposed to the incredible expansiveness, which is so inherent to also the topic that you chose to investigate. So there's that tension there of the demands of the assignment itself and the demands of the method, and then the reality of the incredible depth and richness and generosity that often our participants offer to us. And so I'm sure that there's, I don't know, maybe the analogy of like the incredible toppings over the ice cream, like we got the ice cream in the dissertation, but what are the incredible fudgy, sprinkly toppings that can come and be part of the wider presentation of this moving forward into the next phases of your teachings to everyone else.
Yeah, thank you. I totally agree that the goal was really just to define it, and describe it. That was what we were doing, as well as that's what I was doing as well as I could. And I hear you. There's so many amazing other places to go with it.
And seeking to capture ineffable experience through language is no small feat. That is one of the challenges of a lot of the work that we do in these disciplines. And here you are accomplishing that in a really elegant and very direct way. So I just want to give you
Thank
some
you.
kudos there too, that
Thank you.
it is not simple to describe this through the written word, and you really did a beautiful job of that.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Well, this is our moment of kind of coming to a landing today. Just for context and as a reminder, we'll be picking up this conversation on Thursday with Chandra Alexandra, another one of your committee members, and then we'll come to the fruition of your entire process toward the end of the week. But I just really want to honor the work that you have done, Akasha Jen, the perseverance in your own experience of bringing this into the world, and just to really show you deep appreciation and many, many thanks. And any final words from Ted, you, Judy, as part of the EWP program, as we're coming to a close?
Just thank you very much. Thank you.
It's been a joy, and congratulations on this big milestone. Thank you so much. Okay, so welcome everyone. And this is part 2 of our committee work together. So it's so good to see all of you. And we will have a fairly brief meeting this morning, and we'll open up with Chandra offering some feedback, some questions, just some reflection back to you, Akasha Jen. And then after that, we'll discuss our decision and next steps for the process. So I'm just going to turn it right over to you.
Thank you. Good morning, Akasha Jen. It's great to see you. Thank you for all of your hard work on this dissertation, and thanks for your flexibility with my travels. Really wanted to start with an appreciation for your inquiry. I think that all of the context that you set in the meeting and in the dissertation around a commitment to well-being, a commitment to focus on helping to support people through mental health challenges and the challenges kind of our time post-pandemic is really poignant and powerful. And so just appreciate your centering a focus on how we can show up and how we can show up across different levels of awareness and beingness in support of shared health. And it felt really good to be engaged with your dissertation with that commitment. So I just really want to appreciate that. I do have a question for you, and I'm wondering if you could reflect back a little bit of your sense of how the specifics of your work can be related to embodiment. And I mean that in terms of how we look at psychological integration with soma and how we can understand well-being embodied, body consciousness as part of the whole human experience, and wanted to just understand a little bit more from you how you see that in the context of your work.
Thank you. And I love the question, because I do feel the body is so important in being embodied, especially with spiritual, with the spiritual. So one of the things that I loved most about the research was that many of the participants felt that an important part of it was the vulnerable aspect, the part of them that was experiencing fear or insecurity or whatever it may be, under the umbrella of difficult emotional experience. And what they were doing a lot of the time was just staying with it well enough to not check out or give up. And then from there, a lot of the surrendering happened. And in my experience, when you're staying with those things, usually if you're being present with them, you're feeling them in the body. They're showing up in the body somewhere often, because the quickest way to disassociate and get out of the body is to just not feel and go into the head. So my sense is the participants were, embodied in the process through both experiencing some of the challenges, but also, the pleasant states as well that they were feeling, as their heart bursting open. Or one of the dancers talked about really feeling her feet on the ground, and another participant who is in authentic relating practices also really felt like she could feel her feet, and to me, those are ways of being in the body. So I could probably say more, but does that feel like it answers the question?
I think it's a really, really great response and super helpful. So thank you for that. Would you mind saying a little bit more about how you, so that's great on the noticing, how you feel you might describe that as integrative, or how you would want to bring that into greater understanding in the world through your work? Because I can sense that it might get lost. It doesn't mean it's not present, but it might get lost through words like vulnerability, or even an expression of that open-heartedness, as you said. And I'm wondering about is there a more explicit and simple way that you could think about and would want to share embodiment specifically as an element of your work?
Well, the other piece that comes to mind when you mention that is the senses, and the participants were really being with their experience through the senses. And so I think the senses are also a direct avenue into the body, as well as, what's being experienced outside of the body. So I think integration can happen in that way. In terms of making it more explicit, it's part of the definition, being embodied, it's part of the definition. And a lot of the practices that participants do have to do with the body and the breath and, being present. So I'm not sure. I'll have to sit with the question of how to make it more explicit than that.
Yeah, no, I really appreciate that. And breath definitely as a conduit of energy within the body and such is so deeply powerful. It's really just something that I invite you to think a little bit more about. I don't have a specific thing I'm looking for, but appreciate the response you've given. And I would suggest perhaps more reflection, because that feels deeply important given the context you've laid in the dissertation. And beyond the definition, to call out clearly and simply how the body itself is part of what is healed.
Okay,
Thank you.
Great. Thank you for that. Yeah.
Thank you so much for that. It's a wonderful next layer or integral layer to the work. So it's wonderful to listen in on that.
Yeah, given what she said last time about her in what greater focus in seeing how what she was doing was related to Tantra. And then that piece kind of comes in with your future research list. And so I see what Chandra's bringing up here to really fit into that nicely.
Absolutely.
Yeah, thank you for that. And I would just say, Akasha Jen, I am a tantric practitioner, and so part of my reflection is through that lens. And if there's any way that I can support you going forward, I'm happy to do so.
Thank you. Yes, that's one of the reasons I wanted you on the committee, was because I took you, I don't know if you remember, I was in your tantric class.
I thought so.
Yeah.
A while ago, but yes, thank you.
Okay, any final thoughts, comments, reflections before we move to the last part of our work together? Okay, so I would like to congratulate you, Dr. Smith, on this huge achievement.
Yay.
We have agreed that we are approving with the very minor comments that were offered to you through the email threads. The committee does not need to see the draft again. You and I will be coordinating steps moving forward. So we are sending you off toward completion.
Wonderful.
Yay.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Yes, thank you.
Congratulations.
Yay. Thank you.
This is one of my favorite parts of this job.
Absolutely.
Like this moment.
Yeah, I'm feeling a lot at the same time. I want to cry, I want to jump up and down, I want to exhale, it's all of it. So thank you very, very much.
Yeah. It sounds like you're having the embodied moment that we've just been talking about.
Really,
Wonderful.
really excited
Yes.
for you.
Yes.
Yeah,
Yes.
well deserved.
Indeed. So this, I'm gonna stop the recording here for, since we have concluded our official work together.